This is a global skills podcast, conversations that shape the future of work and learning. We're exploring how we close the skills gap and build a future where everyone has the chance to thrive. From education to business, connecting people, ideas, and opportunities that drive change. It's about collaboration, curiosity, and creating real impact today. Because every skill learned brings us one step closer to a more inclusive world. The Global Skills Podcast, where learning and opportunity come together.
Clare Dygert designs the bridge between human intelligence and AI capability. As a learning systems architect and chief learning strategist at SweetRush, now part of the NIIT group, she helps organizations move beyond AI access into real adoption, fluency, and transformation, grounded in cognitive science, learning design, and hands-on AI workflow building. It turns complexity into clarity, helping teams rethink work, build confidence, and create the kind of learning cultures where people don't just use AI, they grow with it. Delighted to have you on today's episode, Clare.
Well, thank you, Vanessa. You can't even imagine how excited I am to be here.
So a question I love to ask any guest is just really to understand how you ended up in the role that you're in today. What choices did you make in the direction of learning and learning design?
Well, Vanessa, I wanted to be a school teacher, but when I graduated from college, there were very few roles really for women. One being teaching, another nursing, secretaries, and moms. And the baby boom generation was trailing off, and they just didn't need that many school teachers. So I thought to myself, what do I like about what I do? And I decided to try adult education, to go into that. And that's been my whole career. But, what's really important is that reframing moment where I said, I can't do what I originally planned. What can I do that I will enjoy as much because it has the essence of what I really like doing? And that has been such a successful strategy for me throughout my career. I've been able to pivot at key moments. And, I would say to people, think not about a role, but think about what you like to do and find the roles that have those things. They might be in surprising places.
So what is it about the role that you have now today? Maybe actually start with explaining what is it that you do and what is it that you love about what you do?
I basically do consulting. I work with companies who have usually pretty gnarly problems they're trying to solve with training. Like they either have gigantic teams or they have very complicated organizations or they have people who are different than the norm, that are either starting their career or they want something that goes from soup to nuts from the beginning of a career until a person could potentially enter the C-suite. If the project is complicated and challenging, then I tend to get involved with it in the design phase. And I just love trying to figure things out like that, coming up with a new strategy, thinking about what is the simplest way we could solve this problem, not necessarily the most complex, because it won't be maintained if it's complicated.
In what way are problems evolving now in the last few years? Because obviously AI is radically changing learning content on the masses. Companies are kind of pulling away from, let's just buy learning content to tick a box that we've thousands of courses. And now they're really starting to look at that skills gap and go, are we closing it? Are we able to predict what's needed? So what changes are you seeing?
I think the number one change that I'm seeing is that people want content that's adaptive. I think the big promise that AI brings us is that it can create for you what you need in the moment. So learning in the flow of work is really possible, really for the first time ever, I think. Downloading a job aid so you know how to do your expense report, swell. But this is a way to really have a consultant on demand who's going to help you figure something out, how to learn what you want to learn so that you can adjust your own learning path. The second thing is I'm predicting that we're going to be moving away from degrees so much and looking at micro-credentialing, that the learner from one position to the next. And I really like that because, frankly, the cost of education is getting to be so great. Even for the last 5 years, when young people would say to me, do I need to go get a master's degree in learning design? I would usually say to them, no. choose a problem that you're interested in and create a portfolio around it. Basically certify yourself. By the way, I'm working on my own PhD program that isn't associated with the university, but because I always wanted one, but they just don't seem like there's a return on investment for me personally. So this is what I'm doing. I'm working with Claude to develop a PhD program for myself.
And then when you have that PhD, are you then tempted to try and bring it to a number of institutions to see if someone accredits it in that way? It's a bit like self-publishing as an author, isn't it?
It is, but I haven't really felt the urge to have somebody else validate it. If my work itself doesn't validate my education, then what good is my education really? So I don't know what the output will be of this PhD. I should be making air quotes, I suppose, when I say it. I've taken the first month to just explore concepts and ideas and topics that I might be interested in. So right now I'm just sort of browsing. I told somebody I feel like a debutante at a ball and all of the good-looking guys want to dance with me. And that's how I feel about all the different kinds of ideas and topics and interests that I could explore more fully.
So is the essence of what you're saying, it's about really like AI unlocks agency for the person to own their personalized learning and development journey. And I had a guest on recently who I asked the question from a talent acquisition perspective. So I'd love to ask you the same question from the learning perspective. Whose responsibility do you think it is ultimately for an individual, if they're working for a company, for them to take ownership on their skills gap and agency over their learning and close that gap? Is it the employer or the employee?
I think it's the employee. And that doesn't absolve employers from offering learning opportunities because really learning it's a benefit that you're offering to your employees, just like their health care, just like being able to go to conferences or whatever other benefits that you offer as part of your benefit package. Your learning also is part of that benefit package. But I would suggest that we want employers not to be very directive about this. I would encourage employers to say to your employee, what are you interested in? Where do you want to grow? And then make resources available. But as an employee, nobody cares about your career except you. And you cannot forget that for a moment. Because if you don't take the reins and drive yourself to where you want to go, nobody else is going to do it either.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
That's also good parenting advice to your child.
Let me tell you a strategy that I've used for years, like probably for 25 years, 20 years. When did LinkedIn come out? That was when I started doing this. So every year around the end of the year, I think to myself, if I was to lose my job, or where would I want to go to work? What kind of work would I be thinking about? And then I go find a job description for a posting like that. Maybe I find a couple and I do an analysis where I look at my resume and the job posting and say, what's the difference? And the delta is what is my topic for studying this year. So one year I looked at it and it was like, design thinking seems to be all the thing. I don't know anything about it. All right. This year I'm going to become an expert on design thinking. So I went to some conferences, I read some books, I talked to some people, I created my own learning journey there. And then I went to SweetRush and I said, here's an idea for a new product offering. And we started using a design thinking and I was not the only one that worked on this, Vanessa, by the way. There's a huge team of brilliant people at SweetRush that I worked with. But we came up with a product where we could use this for our early phase work with clients. So SweetRush sent me to a conference to learn about it, but everything else I did was on my own. And SweetRush has benefited because now they have a new product offering. They have a whole bunch of people that are trained on how to do design thinking type ideas for learning. So that's the kind of way that it works. And I've been doing this year over year and it keeps me current, it keeps me smart.
It's a phenomenal idea. And it's in a way, you're becoming the recruiter of your own life. That's what a recruitment consultant will tell you. They'll assess the job, your CV, where you're at, and then what you should do to fill gaps. I mean, I love that idea. And I think that idea of like learning is another benefit. Don't you feel though that the company, they benefit? You've given a good example by SweetRush doing that. You've brought so much more value. So in that capacity, it is agency of the employee to start learning. But for the employer, the ROI is just so clearly there. But yet we're still in a world where employees don't know their skills gaps. Organizations don't know what learning to bridge and match that in. What do you think companies could do to improve that so learning uptake improves and people or employees really want to own learning and development for their own journeys within that company?
Well, first of all, I think it is stop being so directive. I like to think of managers as a doula rather than as a manager. You see people that are doulas for childbirth and for dying also. The doula doesn't have the baby. They just facilitate the having of the baby. The doula in hospice situations doesn't do the dying. They facilitate a good death. I think thinking of yourself as a doula when you're working with your team means you're moving obstacles out of the road. You are looking for ways that you can help people plug into different opportunities and experiences so that they fill out their own portfolio. And I think if we think of it that way, rather than everybody must have AI fundamentals, instead help people know who else knows stuff so that they can go talk to them. You've been working with Gemini, but now you would like to learn about Claude Code. Who else in the organization knows about Claude Code? How can you be connected to work that they're doing so that you can learn it also? If you let people grow in the direction that they naturally want to grow in, you're going to have a diverse portfolio of talent that will continue to evolve and grow.
I couldn't agree more. And I think it's probably why I was so excited about the partnership between NIIT Skill Suite and then SweetRush, the acquisition, because it's what we're doing is giving that agency, finding the gap, can plug it in. What your team brings to the table is just this phenomenal ingenuity to new thinking of learning design. Without naming names, is there an example that you can share of a customer that you've worked with where maybe it was quite challenging for them, but you were able to bring in some innovation and it was able to really impact learning uptake?
Well, I'll tell you about one of the projects I worked on was for a organization that provided training for people with cognitive disabilities who are trying to enter the job market. So we have folks they're all adults, they're taking trainings from this organization. But this is a population of people who the first thing they don't do in the evening is sit down with a book. School was not a wonderful experience necessarily for these guys. So what do? How do we train people who are not approaching training the same way that maybe another person would? So number one, we talked to people. We asked them what they wanted. What did they enjoy? What do they like to do? How do they like to learn about things? What they really seemed to enjoy was sitcoms on television. So we made the training into a sitcom. And instead of stopping the flow to say, now we're going to have a quiz question, the deadly knowledge check, we just would work those into commercials. I think it's going to be highly successful. It's a little early to say. I don't have any statistics to prove it, but the way that people are looking at it, the feedback that we're getting is extremely positive. And, why not? So, but it takes a while sometimes for people who are not the audience, but are writing the check for the work to understand that they are not the audience. The way that you or I or somebody else might think about how you want to learn is not what our audience is telling us. So in every project, I try to talk with the audience. That's stop one. I got to hear, what do you like? What do you do when you're not? How did you learn the last thing you learned how to do? What was it? Did you phone a friend? Did you watch a YouTube video? I mean, what is it? So I think that's probably the number one most important thing that I would do when I'm approaching that.
Quick question. Do you actually know what skills exist across your organizations today? Or are decisions still being made on job titles, CVs, and assumptions around who can be reskilled and upskilled? You see, as AI reshapes work and organizations really face that pressure to cut costs, the real challenge isn't just skills gaps. It's understanding which skills are transferable and which can be redeployed into the future with a bit of upskilling. So, for the listeners of Global Skills Podcast, Abodu, our sponsor, has created this free Skills AI readiness assessment. It gives leaders clarity in just 3 minutes. It shows skills gaps, automation exposure, and where future-ready capabilities already exist within your business. No data upload, no preparation, just clarity for the future of your organization. Visit abodu.com/global skills podcast. Now, back to the episode. And is it only the elite companies that can really afford or consider bringing in, design consultants for learning? Or do you think SMBs can consider this? And if so, why? Why should they consider learning design?
This is really an interesting question. I've been thinking about this a lot. Part of the work that I do is fractional CLO work for learning strategist work for smaller organizations outside of SweetRush. And those are really tiny little organizations. And it seems like a lot for them to bring somebody in like me or somebody similar. But in fact, I think it's money saved in the long run. First of all, if say you're a small nonprofit and you just don't have time for this, but you must make time for this, because if your team is working well, if they're working as a team, for sure, you're going to get so much more bang out of their effort than you had before. I've been a part of nonprofits. My parents were big into volunteer work. So I've tried to have a volunteer engagement almost my entire life. And I know how disorganized and how frantic for, just manpower most of these smaller organizations are. But really taking a breath, thinking about what we're doing and using what I know about learning to help train people is going to, in the long run, be a huge investment that pays off.
And you said something there that's really sat with me, because some of the work that we're doing with NIIT is a skills executive workshop to help the CLO and teams find out, well, what is the cost? Because creating a budget for this can be challenging, because it can't necessarily be directly linked to revenue. But since we've been able to quantify the skills gap cost and then measure it again in a year, well, it's an indirect way of measuring it. And now all of a sudden, the skills gap could be costing 2.2 million a year for an enterprise.
Yes.
As you say, even a small company, it could be 100,000. Once you get the buy-in from the organizations to say, look, this is something we can do, what's the timeline from taking, interviewing the end users to designing, to developing the course content and deploying? Like, what journey does that look like?
Well, it's really hard to say that, Vanessa, because at SweetRush, we do all sorts of different kinds of things, and some things can take quite a long time to create and other things can't. I'm most familiar with the design phase of the work, actually, and if the client is available, which is also a big if they have the time to participate in it, really, we could do a very robust design in a month or less, depending on what it is they are looking for. I mean, we need to review all the content and all of that, but really the most important thing is to talk with learners, understand what their expectations are around learning at work, what they know about the topic, what they are interested in, what kind of, how do they like to learn things when they're left alone to their own devices. That part doesn't take really all that long. Using AI, it makes it quite simple to review large amounts of content. You can even do a lot of analysis with recordings from transcripts of talking with learners. All that does is sort of speed things up. I love working with a junior LXD when I'm doing work, and I just treat AI like it's a junior LXD. You still have to review its work. You still have to make sure it's been trained properly and knows what it's doing, but it can zoom through massive amounts of content really quickly if that's what's needed.
And where do you see the industry going? If you were to kind of like crystal ball, what's likely to happen in the coming years when it comes to learning in companies? How do you see it evolving?
I think, first of all, learning how to dynamically generate content so that a person can learn in the flow of work, like I said earlier. Second thing would be really looking at micro-credentialing, not asking people to invest in a big 4-year degree or something more than that, but really in a short-term program that where they learn essential skills that they need right now, connected to how they work. So somehow using everything that we know about learning and also helping people find opportunities to use what they're learning at work. So it's some kind of a exchange. So you look at this portfolio of talent that you have and you help the portfolio move to the places where you can deploy that talent.
We've come from an industry where it was education, experience to careers, and now it's evolving skills to jobs. And now we're nearly skills to tasks or projects.
Yes.
So is that the transition that you're seeing?
I really think so. And
Yeah.
I think so as an employee, you might be hearing this and think, oh my Lord, this certainly doesn't sound like the job my parents had. And it's right. But this is actually good because if you think of what you do as tasks or small chunks of stuff that can be reassembled in a lot of different ways so that you can look for opportunities to work in a lot of different places, doing a lot of different industries, for example. I mean, industry specific understanding is just one piece of a lot of other skills that you might already have. So I think it makes you more resilient, more possible to find work. And believe me, right now, everybody is thinking about all that very hard, I think.
Yeah. I think you've raised a good point about the transferable skills because we come from the 80s, 90s, noughties where it was stay in your lane. Maybe you can change your job a little bit, but if you're in tech, if you're in telecommunications, stay in that. But now we're seeing so many people transferring skills to new industries, and AI is the segue and the new skills acquisition is the language. What, from the perspective of the work that you're doing with SweetRush, do you still see a big play in design, or do you see being able to produce work that's very original in its content creation, but giving more people access to it? Do you see a change in that, or do you think it'll always be bespoke to the needs of each and every company and what they need to get the best results?
That's hard to say. SweetRush does bespoke work. That is the niche that we do. I think there will always be a demand for that. We're in this transitional time right now. We're not where we're going to be and we're not where we were. So the most important thing, I think, is to sort of be like a tennis player on the balls of your feet, waiting to see what's going to come next. I think there will always be, or there will be for the foreseeable future, a demand for bespoke learning like the type that SweetRush does. We're able to take brand new technologies as they evolve and appear in the market, and using the solid kind of learning principles that we already have, make use of that technology. Vanessa, when we had the pandemic, people were like, oh, this is a black swan event. The last black swan event we had was, in 1984 when the microcomputers came out. And here we are, 4 years, what has it been, 4 or 5 years later? And we have another black swan event. I think they're no longer going to be black swan events. It's going to be happening all the time. So organizations and individuals need to be looking at how can I pivot most comfortably? And I think thinking about skills and talent as smaller pieces that can be assembled as you need to is one strategy that might actually help you.
For someone who's listening today and thinking, gosh, I'd love to do what Claire does, what advice would you give them? What's the pathway that they could take now to get to the role that you're in?
I got here because I just kept putting one foot in front of the other, Vanessa. What seemed like the next logical thing to do? And so here I am. If you want to get to this place, I would highly recommend that you learn your craft. Learn the basics, the fundamentals, learn how to talk about your craft. It took me a long time to get to that place. I'm a introvert by nature, and I also wasn't a great trumpeter of my own skills, let's say. So learn what you need to learn about the foundations, the fundamentals, talk to people, look for opportunities to do things. I have always said to people, you can do things as a volunteer that nobody would ever pay you to do. So build your portfolio that way, try to make the world a better place using the skills that you have. Yeah, that would be my best advice. And stay curious. My Lord. I mean, there's so many interesting things in the world to be curious about. Back in the 80s, I was working for a cooperative of school districts in Western New York. We had microcomputers came out. So we were doing distributed payroll and accounting for these school districts, 52 of them, 52 school districts. But we're going to switch over to using microcomputers. So I went out to this one little school district all the time. And the payroll clerk in there, every time I'd walk in, she'd look up at me and she'd glare at me and she'd say, I hate this thing. I'm going to throw it out the window. And I thought to myself, I don't want to get to the end of my career and be saying that to some young person that's coming in with whatever the new thing is. I want to stay up. I want to stay current. And the best way for me to have done that was to stay curious. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
The very last one is advice you'd give to people, which you've just nailed. I mean, and I think also for people that are more advanced in their careers, think twice before you belittle or put someone down, because everyone's feeling the pressure and it is just about learning. But the question I wanted to ask you, is there a skill that you used a lot when you were younger that you don't use anymore or that you're starting to use again, and why do you love it?
That's a wonderful question. I think probably the number one skill that I used when I was younger that I didn't use for a long time was really about, digging into content topics on my own. I used SMEs a lot in the middle. I got very good at using subject matter experts, but learning how to find out about stuff on my own without talking to a subject matter expert. I'm doing that now more because I have AI to help me. AI can be the subject matter expert on a lot of things for me. So that makes that research easier for me in a lot of ways now. I'm better at framing the questions in a way that I can get the content that I need, even when I don't have any content to work from.
You're an incredible artist.
Oh,
You also paint.
oh, yes.
We have that in common, the art.
Yes, yes. An unschooled artist at that too. So everything I've had to learn, I've learned kind of on my own. But yes, if anybody wants to see my art, it's at dancingcrowart.com. So
We'll check it out. You kindly said that you have a paper that you might have
yes,
available.
I do. I have a white paper on team cognition, which is a totally different thing from teamwork, in case people might be confused. But team cognition is really how you make a safe liminal space for creative groups to come together. And that's what's going to make new products, services, and ways of working for your organization, I think.
I knew this was going to be a special episode because I said to you at the very beginning, you're a true creative, from the art to the design that you do to how you approach it. To me, how you describe things is the learners at the heart of everything, or the humans at the heart of everything. Thank you so much for just an uplifting interview. I really learned a lot and I really appreciate you coming on today.
One last thing, and I appreciate being here so much, Vanessa. This has been so fun and energizing. I don't know how I'll turn to doing my mundane work after this, but if there's somebody that's listening to me that's a young person that would like to talk with me, I'm on LinkedIn. Just reach out. I never say no. I always say yes to that kind of request. So if I can be of help or service to anyone, I'm here for you. I know these are challenging times for some folks, but I think the only way we're really going to muddle through all this is together, right?
Completely agree. Thank you so much, Claire.
Thank you, Vanessa.
Whether you're leading a business, shaping education, planning your next career move, or just starting out, you're part of a global conversation about how we learn, work, and grow. If you've enjoyed this episode, tap subscribe so you never miss the latest insights. And if you've a moment, leaving a quick rating really helps people find the show. For early access to new episodes, event invitations, and the chance to connect with others driving real change, join the community at globalskillspodcast.com. The future of skills belongs to all of us. Proudly sponsored by Abodu, empowering organisations and educators with world-class skills technology to build a better future for everyone.